Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 12th of October 2024. I can't remember the last time I did a Frontline update. It was the 9th, so this is a 3-day update. A lot will have changed. I did promise I was going to get you regular updates since the last one, but actually had some technical issues with the automation that have now been ironed out. I've been on the blower with JR for quite some large periods of today, and we sorted out the automation. He's amazing, and this is going to make certainly my life a lot easier with regard to putting the maps together. So here we have them. If you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out the key on the screen at the moment. Pause the video. Right, this is the state of play for the maps for the map at the moment with Andrew Perpetua and Suryat maps. I'm not going to go through Deep State map today, but I will be adding that in. Those two mappers, though, synthesized into this one map. Still can't sort out these labels, so there are going to be the RU gains labels. We can't. It sounds easy to just delete the labels. You can't do that. You certainly need something in there to be able to differentiate the different colored labels. So that anyway, I don't want to bore you about how Google Maps and Google Earth work, but we'll have to sort that issue out going forward. Okay, here's a map. We're going to go up to the Kursk area, where, as you can see, the Russians are definitely closing that area down to some degree, right? If we take out the pins, you'll be able to see that if we take out the Andrew Perpetua pins and the Suryat map pins, you'll be able to see that actually here there are quite some areas that have been taken back from the Ukrainians, particularly in this western side of the salient, a little bit to the east as well, down here by Plakovo, now presenting a bit of an encirclement for the Ukrainians there, the map according to Suryat map, so not so much as according to Andrew Perpetua. And as you can see, there are these huge differences between the two mappers still, with this large area between the blue line of Andrew Perpetua and the red line or orange line of Suryat maps there, denoting that vast difference. And that's the same most places around this Kursk area. If we turn back those turn those pins back on, we'll go and look at this area down here that Suryat map says around the border area near Novyi Put and up to Obukovka and Vesoloya. The Russians have pushed the Ukrainians back towards the border, only having well, actually this would be grey zone according to Suryat maps, and probably just the Ukrainians back at the border. Really, that's not what Andrew Perpetua has, which he has a Russian line still much further back here, north of Vesoloya actually. So again, pretty considerable differences there. And then around here, this is where the line was for Suryat maps. Russians pushing right back towards Novoivanovka and retaking Zeleny Shlak. And we have there's a settlement here anyway. I think it's being covered by Lyubimovka, that's what I was looking for. So this is Lyubimovka that the Russians have taken back, as according to Suryat maps. Lots of fighting around there, both north of Lyubimovka, with the Russians taking all of this land back, and then south of Lyubimovka, taking possibly Nizhny Kin. So as some of the sources say, the Ukraine control map here says, looks like Ukrainian forces have been pushed out of their northwest positions in Kursk. We'll see what it clarifies as. So that's Zeleny Shlyak, as I just mentioned, that is there now, possibly under control of the Russians. No reports said, and this is going back 2 days now. In the Kursk region, Russian forces are giving it another go with offensive actions towards Zeleny Shlyak. Video footage confirms a Russian mechanized attack, while Ukrainian military sources also claim a column of 30 vehicles approached their positions. Reportedly 15 were destroyed. The map is adjusted, and it's assumed that Russia now controls a larger part of Lyubimovka, while the main road to Koronova is not UA controlled anymore, but disputed given the fact that Russian forces feel confident enough to attack via the main road. So that is what No Reports has to say there, and that's going to be this road here going up to Koronovo, all the way down here. And the idea is it's being compromised, the road in that area, to the kind of north or to the east of Lyubimovka. So that is No Reports there. And then No Reports again says, with an update on Lyubimovka area, Russians managed to further advance near there and have reached Zeleny Shalak. Furthermore, there are Russian claims of multiple breakthroughs in other areas, but this is unconfirmed until now. So, yeah, slightly challenging for the Ukrainians, I think, up in Kursk. Although there were also some cryptic claims that actually the Russians have lost huge amounts up here, and we'll let you know type thing. So, either way, I think the Russians will have attrited themselves quite considerably. As you can see, video footage showing some losses, and the claims were, as mentioned previously, a mechanized attack of 30, losing 15 of them, so 50% of the vehicles attacking in that particular area. So the Russians will be made to work for the gains that they have here. And like I've said previously, this is what you would expect. The Ukrainians attacked into here, trying to tempt the Russians into committing huge numbers of troops to retake the area. It seems that Kursk is not only a PR win for those inside Ukraine, so Ukrainians are genuinely quite happy with this state of affairs. It's been a morale boost for Ukrainians, but as Sean Pinner was saying, this is hurting the Russians. The Russians do not like this situation at all. It's a PR loss for them. And anyway, Surat Maps also claiming that north of Pukovo, that the Russians have made some gains there, which would basically operationally encircle the settlement. So that's certainly something to look out for, and that's a bit of a challenge there. Andrew Perpetuate says, as we go, so we're going to come out of the Kursk region. We'll keep an eye on that, obviously. Come to the Kharkiv region, where it's considerably smaller. And remember, previously we were really worried about that quite sizable chunk of land. But actually, compared to what the Ukrainians have taken control of in Kursk, it is not nearly as big. Now, Vovchansk, the Russians claim to have retaken Vovchansk. You can see that reflected on Surat Maps, and Andrew Perpetua is sort of taking the mickey here. The Russians captured the aggregate plant, and he shows Russians hammering it with their own artillery and guided glide bombs. Maybe they captured it because they like shooting toss at their own guys. They hung a flag, fake news. So this is Andrew Perpetua having a right go at people who Surat Maps, I think, is firmly in his sights, who claim that the Russians control this because there's a flag hanging there, which of course you can drop with a drone. It was foggy, I think, in the area at the time. There was all sorts of confusion going on, and the Russians are bombing or slamming toss thermobaric munitions into the aggregates plant, and if they control that plant, then they would not be doing that. So it's almost certain that Surat Maps is incorrect in the claim that the aggregates plant is controlled by the Russians. Okay, now we're going to move move to the north of the Ukrainian front line, as in the established front lines within occupied Ukrainian territory, and starting up in the Kupyansk area as it comes Kupyansk-Svatove. We have Andrew Perpetua showing that the Russians have made some gains in the forest, or down really to the edge of the forest, sort of southwest of Sinkivka. This is Liman Pershi, that whole forest area beneath there. This is where the great documentary program Enemy in the Woods was filmed. BBC documentary with basically the Ukrainian soldiers filming it themselves on body cameras. Absolutely brilliant documentary. I'd advise you go and watch that. It's kind of heartbreaking because a number of the people who featured in that have since died in activities in and around that area, as the filmmakers have announced, variously. Anyway, the Ukrainians under pressure in the Kupyansk area as the Russians are creeping forward there. Ukrainians do have the advantage of height over here, overlooking large areas of the north from higher ground. So that's going to be difficult for the Russians to contend with. But as you see here, they have had these kind of mounting successes down in the Pischani area. And, they'll be looking to join that all up as they fight towards the Oskil River. Andrew Perpetua has the Russians making a few more very small gains near Kotelya-Rivka, not nearly as extensive as claimed by Surat Map. Speaking of which, Surat Map's claiming that the Russians have pushed forward a little bit south of Stelmakivka, just taking part of a road along there and a bit of a field to its west, so nothing too significant. And then actually no change. So this is 3 days of no change. There were claims from, I think, reporting from Ukraine and others that the Ukrainians have pushed back around the Terny-Torska area. Seems to be fairly dynamic fighting going on there on both sides. You had these huge claims from Surat Maps, if you remember, that they had taken all of Bilorivka and came all the way down to Serebianka. Right, interesting that is no longer on the map. So this is 3 days worth of map changing, and you don't see that. That has obviously rolled back. They also made a big claim that they were in control of Verkhnokh-Mianska, and that has been rolled back. So we need to be careful what is claimed by Surat Maps. They will make these really extensive claims based on rumour, hearsay, and the Russian MOD, all of which is not necessarily particularly reliable. Indeed, you have this whole chalk area. I mean, that they had the Russians taking this whole chalk quarry in 1 day, just moving right across there and right across these hills, and then all the way down the Seversky Donetsk River to Hirivka and whatnot. It was just insanely unrealistic. But there you go. So some a bit of rejigging of Surat Maps. His map there shows that actually is broadly back where it was to some degree. I mean, it appears that the Russians have got control again of this area of meandering river just north of the main river there, north of these taller hills. Surat Maps has the Russians in control of that kind of mountain. These are pretty high. If you see video footage of the activity coming from here, these guys really do look down on the ground below. And so if the Russians do have control of that, that is significant. Surat Maps has that. Andrew Perpetua doesn't. So it's worth taking that into account. But yeah, this is dialing back the excitement of what they were previously claiming, which is all the way over here, to much more modest claims, but still some gains for the Russians. So that's where we are with Surat Maps. But remember, big difference between them and Andrew Perpetua, who is a more conservative and I think more reliable mapper, but is always useful to see what both say. Here we have Andrew Perpetua agreeing that the Russians have made some gains towards Verkhnokh-Mianska, and that there's fighting inside that settlement. This is all a big change, kind of came out of nowhere. You have the Surat Maps still having really extensive mapping changes here. So essentially all of this area down there, if you basically go back to Andrew Perpetua's lines, all of this is what Surat Maps has the Russians gaining in the last sort of week. Really significant there. Now, worth noting that there are no changes to the north of the Bakhmut sector, and indeed to the Chasiv Yar area for both the mappers there. So that's 3 days of no change. That's excellent news for the Ukrainians. There were claims that the Russians had got a foothold across the canal and were seeking to maintain that. I don't know what the latest is there, but it looks like that's challenging for the Russians, where they are having success. In other places like Toretsk, there are claims that the Russians now control somewhere between 40 and 50% of Toretsk. And as you can see from Andrew Perpetua, they have made some more gains inside the centre. But of course, there will be a lot of grey zone around here where both sides are fighting, and it's not that one side controls it or the other. That is likely to be the case in much of Toretsk over here, probably a lot of what Surat Maps is claiming the Russians control, you could probably assume that a good deal of that will be grey zone. That seems to be the case quite often with them. Now, Surat Maps also has some gains around the west of New York. Not so much though, just small gains to the west of those pins. If you draw a line through those pins, that will be where the previous Surat Maps line was. Okay, so there is that. What do we have? Yes, sorry, going back up to Bilorivka. So no report says, strange, since there's been no news from this area for a long time. Russian troops have been spotted in parts of Hirivka. So this was before, near Bilorivka. This news needs further confirmation, but it seems that Russian troops have managed to bypass Ukrainian troops. That was along that river, claiming that there's a bit of grey zone going on there. But yeah, it doesn't seem to have been anything more than maybe some deep reconnaissance groups or similar. Anyway, going back to Pokrovsk now. Actually, we're going to go to Donetsk, as we've just been. Rob Lee, as a source says, and he's quoting from the Kyiv Independent here. I don't think the town, Donetsk, will hold out for long, said Ukrainian artilleryman Alexander, with the 109th Territorial Defence Brigade deployed in the area, stressing that there's a serious shortage of people. Situation is very bad, and if our command doesn't send reserves there in the nearest future, the situation will be very difficult, if not catastrophic, Ukrainian military expert Zyrokov told the Kyiv Independent. For Alexander, who is defending the Ukrainian-controlled parts of Donetsk, the ammunition shortages in his unit has worsened since April, leaving insufficient amounts to target all Russian positions. And this is something we hear off and on. We hear both. We hear the Russians saying the Ukrainians have no problems with artillery ammunition. They've got loads more than they did have. And we've got the Ukrainians saying that they still have these shortages. So it may be quite different depending on where you are along the front line. He said that his artillery battery, which operates on 4 different weapon systems, only receives enough shells to shoot 5 to 10 times daily, and compared to a few months ago when Russian troops were only trying to advance where they saw the opportunities, quote, they are heavily trying to assault Ukrainian defense positions in the area, he added. So yeah, that is certainly a challenge. And Ukraine holds 40 to 50% of Donetsk. So actually, Russians claiming 50 to 60. So I got that the wrong way around. Says administration head. Ukraine roughly controls 40 to 50% of the town, while the rest has been captured by Russia. Cities and military administration said. So anyway, down to the area around. I think this is Mykolaiivka. Which is, yeah, here it is. So this small village on the way to Pokrovsk, just to the south of it, Russians have made some gains in the fields there, and west of Krasny Yar. So if we look at the dark purple pins there, you can imagine that line going through all of them. That means that all of this area has just been taken. Andrew Perpetua has a slightly larger area, starting the Russians being further back previously, but now they broadly agree that the Russians control all of this area around Mykolaiivka. And then when we come down, luckily not too much change around Seledove, north of there. There's a little bit just south of Seledove as the Russians as according to Andrew Perpetua, taking control of a few fields alongside the railway line as it comes up to Seledove there. Now there's been this area being surrounded here pretty much south of Seledove on the way to this kind of Mariinka area, Kharkiv. We have the Russians taking control of some more of this, what looks like railway line on the way to Kharkiv. Andrew Perpetua, a little bit more conservative than Surat Maps, but that's certainly a concern. Interesting listening to Andrew Perpetua's live stream the other night, talking about this whole area. I'd advise you go and listen to him. He's slightly worried about the south here, allowing this whole, what's supposed to be quite well defended. If you can get in behind that, then it becomes a bit of a problem. So the Russians, watch out for this area around here as they kind of stall coming across the better Ukrainian defenses that have been built into this kind of area. But yeah, go and watch him for those details. A little bit of a gain for the Russians just to the west of Prichistivka. This is a place that has been absolutely hammered by guided glide bombs. As I said earlier in a video earlier, the Russians have changed their tactics from assaulting places with mechanized assaults and meat waves of humans. They actually just completely destroy settlements now and fortifications with guided glide bombs. And once they've rubberized these areas and taken out those positions, then they can just walk in much more easily. And that's exactly what happened in Prichistivka, which was kind of flattened and then they just rolled over it. And that is why it's so important to take out these airplanes and to take out these bases. It's really good news that today a Su-34, while dropping guided glide bombs, was supposedly shot out of the sky 50 kilometers behind the contact line. If the Ukrainians are able to do that either with F-16s, as some of the rumors are claiming, or air defenses, that means that they are taking some risks, because it is so important that these airplanes are stopped. Really good news for the Ukrainians there. Right, some fairly substantial changes according to Andrew Perpetua in the Robotyne area, where the Russians have control over quite a number of fields, and the rest really of Robotyne, with only kind of the north. I mean, this is completely flattened Robotyne. It's not a place that you're going to hold on to with any great ease, as there are relatively few basements and anything really to hide in. It's just being completely obliterated. The Russians inexorably moving on there, it seems, moving up towards Malotokmachka and Orikhiv. So that's definitely a challenge for the Ukrainians there. Andrew Perpetua's mapping slightly more conservative there as well than Surat maps. And then the only blue pins really to see here are in the Kamyanska area, which is where the Russians attacked north across this kind of causeway, the river estuary of the Dnieper, as it comes into the reservoir, what is now not so much a reservoir. If you zoom out, I don't know if it did it the other day. Yeah, you can see that actually the water disappears depending on what magnification you have as to what actually the terrain is according to this map. So from here you can see that actually Dnipro comes down here. That isn't a Dnipro. That's going to be a much smaller river. So that it could well be easy. That's where the water would have been when it was dammed. It could be that actually getting across here is really easy, and that's why they attacked along this causeway and across this river into the northern part of this let's call it an estuary, which hadn't been attacked. You know, there's been no Russian presence here. This has been the dividing line of the two lines for an awful long time. Now, that was a bit worrying there, but it seems like the Ukrainians have repelled the Russians and pushed them back across that river estuary. So good news there for the Ukrainians in keeping control of the land they previously had. Okay, that's enough from me. Hopefully that was of use. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your patience with me for the mapping. It should now be fine. I should be able to do the mapping relatively quickly compared to what I used to. Fingers crossed. But really appreciate your support, guys. Take care and speak to you soon.